Madam Secretary, please note for the record that all council members are in attendance tonight. We have a full quorum. And with that, I will call our meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome all the citizens who are here tonight to either interact with us as council or just observe what we do. I would like to point out a special guest or person who is here tonight, and that's Representative Jeannie Morrison and her chief of staff who are here tonight. And I think I see our former Mayor Will Armstrong. So welcome to our council meeting. Moving on to communication items, item from council. Before we begin, I would like to pull item D1 from the consent agenda because I need to abstain from the reading of the minutes. Now, if you don't mind, may we move forward with
Sure.
Proclamations?
There's a proclamation on the agenda tonight to declare National Hospice and Palliative Care Month, and it reads in part, whereas hospice and palliative care is a specialized form of health care for people with serious and life-limiting illnesses provided by interdisciplinary teams of physicians, nurses, and social workers, pharmacists, allied therapists, psychological and spiritual counselors, and trained community volunteers. Hospice and palliative care is a person-centered, individualized treatment to accommodate the needs and wishes of a patient and a family. At the center of hospice and palliative care is the belief that each of us has the right to live and die pain-free and with dignity, and that our families will receive the necessary support to allow us to do so. And whereas all American patients and their caregivers deserve access to the important care and support that hospice and palliative care provide. Unfortunately, just as baby boomer generation is reaching their senior years, the hospice and palliative care workforce is struggling to keep up with demand. If action is not taken, there will be only one physician for every 26,000 seriously ill patients by 2030. And whereas members of the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization urge Congress to ensure a strong American healthcare workforce to address the needs of aging baby boomers and Americans facing serious illness and end of life. Now, therefore, I, Raleigh McCoy, Mayor of the City of Victoria, Texas, do officially declare November 2019 to be National Hospice and Palliative Care Month in Victoria, Texas, and encourage citizens to increase their understanding and awareness of care at the end of life and to observe this month with appropriate activities and programs. It's signed today by Mayor Raleigh McCoy. Is there someone to receive?
And Kathleen Carey Card, I believe, is in the audience today. Can you please come forward?
Coming this April, we will be serving 35 years in Victoria and the surrounding counties. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to our inpatient unit. It just opened up right after Harvey, but it's a wonderful addition to our hospice services. So now not only can we take care of patients in their home setting, but we also have our inpatient short-term stay for anyone that needs extra symptom management or pain management, because that's our number one priority. And we don't only take care of the patient, but we also take care of their families as well. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the compassion that you provide to our citizens.
Well, we love this town, so, and all the counties around it.
Okay. I think the next item on items from council is discussion of the procedure for second and third reading of ordinances. Mr. Lofgren?
The reason I wanted to bring this up is I always wondered why the second and third reading was combined. To me, it was the final reading, not the second and third reading. I think it's important on many topics that we have three readings, but I'd like Thomas to sort of fill us in on how this came to be, that we combine the second and third reading, and then maybe have a discussion about, should we combine the second and third reading?
Absolutely. And I have 2 slides in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to step down to the podium because this is fairly short, but if we can put the first slide up, it'll show the language of section 2-26 out of the city code. And we have to switch our monitors over here. That's why you see everyone reaching for their TV screens. Section 2-26 is the section of city code that relates to how we amend city ordinances and city code. And what it says is, and there's a lot of words in the middle that don't matter to this that deal with emergency readings, which I don't think we're talking about tonight. So if James, if you can go to the second slide, it kind of grays out the stuff in the middle that doesn't matter as much. The passage of all other ordinances shall be by reading the same at 3 meetings of city council by caption or title. Let me explain what that part means before we move to the end. It says the passage of all other ordinances. This paragraph D right before this talked about franchise fees and franchise ordinances. And so here we're talking about non-franchise ordinance. That's why it uses the word other. Shall be by reading the same at 3 meetings of city council by caption or title. That's why we read off of the agenda what the caption of the agenda is. And we don't have to read the entire ordinance. Then if you skip to the final sentence of the paragraph, it says, the city council may combine the second and third reading of such ordinance into 1 meeting. So April and I did some research, and we went back and discovered that this section of code has been in the city code since 1960, when the code was initially codified. Now, I know there was a code before 1960, but that's as far back as our electronic code goes. And so at least as far back as 1960, this has been in the code in exactly this language. It has not been changed since then. We also looked back at what has been city council's practice. And it has been city council's practice since at least 1970 to combine the second and third reading together into a single reading. Mr. Lofgren asked me this morning what was the reason for that, and I can only assume that it was done for the purpose of efficiency. As he and I discussed, anytime that you have to wait for 3 meetings to get something done, you're talking about at least a 6-week period. And so if there's the ability for us to move things forward in 4 weeks instead of 6, then, have I done my math wrong? It's not 6, anyway. 2 meetings instead of 3 meetings. Let me stick to that. I'm not a math guy. Right.
Could be as much as 7 if there's a 5 Tuesday.
Right, and you add into that the fact that penalty provisions require that we publish for 10 days before something can become effective. You can be looking at a 2-month window before something becomes effective if you stretch it out across 3 readings. So it's my assumption that it was council's decision way back in the 70s at some point to try to streamline and make operation more efficient by combining second and third readings. And it has simply been our practice ever since to follow that. I've been the city attorney for 10 years now. This question has not come up before yet, Councilmember Lofgren. And so if council chooses to go a different direction, we certainly can restructure the way we're doing our meetings. It is completely within the discretion of council, as the code says.
Well, let me add, I think there's 2 kinds of ordinances. There's ordinances that actually change the code, and then there are other ordinances that we have to pass because it's the law. And there are some in our agenda today about the budget, for example. Those don't need a third reading. But I think anything that changes the code needs discussion. And the more it may pass quickly, it may not, nobody bring up anything at the third reading. But things with code, and I'll give you an example, the camping ordinance. It got tabled and postponed because really it needed to be discussed more. I think any ordinance that affects the code should have 3 readings like it was intended in the original code. I think other ordinances that don't affect the code, they don't need 3 readings.
I'll tell you my opinion on it is I like it just like it is. And if you want a third reading, every ordinance that requires a second and third reading, you can make a motion to split it into a third reading and just rather leave it like it is.
Well, and I understand how you feel, and council can do that, but then it's out there for the public to see more. And I think the public needs to see these ordinances more. Oftentimes, we have the public hearing after the first reading of the ordinance. and there's not a lot of public input. I think we should have every opportunity for the public to have input. I would like to go, for ordinances that change the code, I think we should have 3 readings.
Well, I actually have often wondered, I've actually had people in my short tenure ask, why do you say that an ordinance requires 3 readings and then you don't have 3 readings? And so I've had that asked of me by people. I think, and one of the things that I've gotten positive feedback from citizens that I talk to, that I run into, is that council is making an effort to have more discussion on matters, and they appreciate that very much. It seems to me like we have something that was written, and we appear to be making the exception the rule. Perhaps we could adopt on, like Councilman Bachnight mentioned, if somebody really feels that it's an issue after the first reading, that once you do the first reading, maybe you have a vote to combine the second and third reading and get the will of council based upon what it is. And do it like that instead of in reverse. So that's my opinion on it.
I'd be for that.
I kind of think that now more people are more aware of what's going on than they were in 1960. And in 1960, this was put into place. I mean, we know that people are watching this on TV. We know they're perhaps watching it streamed, I'm not sure. The fact that they come and ask us things like, why do you do those readings, says that they're aware of it. However, this is already in our code that we have this opportunity, and I don't think the public is having more trouble now finding out information. I think it's much more readily available, so I'm not really persuaded to change it. I agree that if something comes up, we can ask for it to be broken into readings, but I think that there's enough items on our agenda, and I'm happy with it the way it is.
I echo your sentiment and Councilman Bachknight's sentiment in that regard as well.
I was going to say the same thing before you even said it, but, thank you. Great minds think alike.
Forgive me, what?
I
missed
would
your
go
comment.
with the way that we have it right now and just split it whenever we need to.
Well, that appears to be the consensus of 4 members here, so I think that pretty much establishes it. I think we need to be more cognizant of the fact that if something does come up, I think any and all of us should speak up if we feel like our constituents, it would be important to them to have a third reading and be more cognizant of that fact moving forward, okay?
So that motion needs to be made at the time that we're discussing that code or ordinance?
Well, I think when you get a sense of, if something is important to you, bring it up at perhaps a first reading, or certainly before we begin the deliberations on a second and third reading. And then to where we're all aware of what our constituents are telling us. And I think we can handle it that way. But I'm glad that you brought the issue up, Mr. Lofgren, because I have gotten the question for people. It's kind of like, why do you have 3 readings and then you don't have 3 readings? So the heightened awareness, and guess what? We can always change it if people speak out more about it. So I think we've kind of given a consensus of where we're going to do, and we can move forward.
I just have a question for clarification. True, the best time to bring it up is as soon as you're thinking about it. But if we're in the middle of a second and third reading and the discussion causes there to be some amendments and stuff, I don't think what you're saying precludes somebody from at that point saying.
No.
Just because
No,
you
at
said.
any point you feel as though that, I think that any one of us, I think we've pretty much established a good working relationship of this body. And I think anytime any of us feel compelled that we want to do that, the rest of the body should respect that
Well, yes and
thing
no.
and at least consider it.
Right, but it's still be subject to
That's right.
the will of the
That's right,
majority.
absolutely.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can also help alleviate some of the concerns about the procedural elements of that, as we've discussed in the past, we can relax some of the formality of Robert's Rules of Order. But even if you want to handle it through a formal motion in Robert's Rules of Order and you're considering doing that, just raise the issue, and I'd be happy to help craft a formal motion if that's what the body wants to see happen. Or if you want to handle it informally, we can walk through that. The key is just going to be to verbalize it at the time that you're interested in seeing it split.
So when someone tables an issue during the second and third reading, that second and third reading happen the next council meeting, if that date is set, correct?
That's correct. A motion to table brings that item back at the next meeting. That is not the same thing as a motion to split the second and third reading, although it has basically the same effect. It brings it back at another meeting for further discussion.
And that's going to take place starting today. If something, we can do that today. Okay.
We've been doing it
You could
the whole
make it
6 years that I've been on council. It's been no different than what we've been doing.
It's just, if you are compelled as a member
We've
of
done that.
council to bring it forward, bring it forward at the time that you feel as though it's important to you and your constituency, okay? All right. I guess, any other items from council?
I was just going to wish everybody a happy holiday for Thanksgiving, and we pray for our families that are coming from far away. I was thinking my grandkids were going to be here today. They wanted to come to the city council meeting, but they won't be able to.
And city offices are closed Thursday and
Thursday,
Friday?
oh, yeah, sorry,
of next
Thursday
week?
and Friday.
Uh-huh.
Not this week, next week.
Yeah, we could close them this week too, though.
Without pay.
Yeah.
Without a third
Happy
reading?
Thanksgiving.
Next Thursday and Friday.
Next Thursday and Friday, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. If there are no other items from council, then I'll move into citizen communication. It is our practice to allow people that speak and during citizen communication to have 5 minutes to express their issues. I think we do have a member here from Suddenlink tonight, and without objection, if he would ask for a few more minutes, I would not object to allowing that, if I don't have anyone from council to object. Okay.
No, it's fine.
All right, well, I'll open up citizens' communication then. Anyone with an item before council who wants to speak to us on an item on or off the agenda, please move forward. We don't have any, if you're here to speak to anything under public hearings, we do ask that you wait until that public hearing comes up and reserve your comments for that time. Okay? Mayor Armstrong?
Well, I'm Will Armstrong, 105 Creekside. I got a letter from the city secretary mentioning that there were going to be some appointments to the sales tax board. And I'm on that sales tax board, and I would like to be reappointed. And I'll give you 4.5 minutes back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Best argument ever.
Right, the mic is open for any other citizens' comments.
I'm Michael Vondro from East North Mobile Home Park. I want to appreciate, thanks Suddenlink. They did an excellent job on burying the cable, and they used PVC pipe and stapled it. It looked real neat and professional, and I'm glad they were able to come and do an excellent job. I was very pleased with their service, so someone went to bat for me. I don't know. I don't care, but I appreciate it. And we have a problem with trash blocking the mail courier's route. And when I say trash, I mean sofas and couches and beds and mattresses. And this has been going on for about a year, and still nothing is resolved. And I was wondering if someone solid waste disposal could maybe put out a memo and put it in their mailboxes and explain the procedures, because people, after they got all that trash, they dumped some more trash. And some of the people that live there aren't very educated, and some don't even know English. And I was wondering if they could explain it in a way that people could understand it. You know, when the city attorney speaks to people, he simplifies it. You know, he knows not everyone is as smart as him, not everyone's an attorney, so he breaks it down to where the average Joe can understand it. Thanks, and have a good day, and thanks for having me up here.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
My name is Travis Nance. I'm the Regional Vice President for Suddenlink. I live in Bryan College Station, and I'm here because I've been working with City Manager Garza. He brought concerns that citizens had, as well as members of council, to us. We've been working on that for a little while, and then on Friday, myself and Charlotte Strong, who's our Director of Operations, met with City Manager Garza, Mayor McCoy, and City Attorney to basically talk about the concerns that you've heard from your constituents, as well as from citizens and our customers. And so I'm coming here to let you know that I do hear you loud and clear. And I also want citizens to know that City Manager Garza and Mayor McCoy have been very diligent in terms of following up with us and making sure that the voices were heard and that they were a strong advocate for having a really good partner in this community, a partner that would move the city forward in terms of economic development, in terms of broadband access for all, and that we looked at service areas where we did not perform extremely well and come back with a plan. And so when we met Friday, we outlined a number of different things that I committed to come back to city manager and mayor with answers to, and a plan in terms of where we are right now. We recently went through the largest initiative in our company's really history, or at least certainly in the last 10, 15 years, where we completely upgraded our billing system as well as our operating system. To put that in perspective, every tool that a customer touches, every tool that one of our technicians touches, every interface that we have in our organization went through this upgrade, and that was launched at Labor Day. It was the consulting group that came in, planned with us on this for over a year and a half, going through test cases and working through any bugs and potential pitfalls, building contingency plans and everything else. It was a major, major initiative. As a result of that, we did see interruptions. We did have a couple of issues that were very significant, that were customer impacting, both from standpoint of billing, from service interruptions for specific customers. And what ended up happening was response time in terms of if a customer was trying to contact one of our care centers to get support, or if they were going into our local retail office, they experienced long wait times. And I appreciate very much their patience. I understand what that has done from the perspective of a customer, losing a bit of faith in our ability to respond, not feeling like they can communicate with somebody and get their problem solved in a quick manner. I'm happy to say that as we have moved through that, our average wait times have come drastically down from a care perspective, where a customer that's calling in a day is able to get through quickly with an agent. They're able to go through online chat. We also have implemented an opt-out callback where customers can choose to either be called back by the first available agent or schedule a time where they would like to receive a call back. I was in our retail store on Friday and again today, and I was happy to report there was no line. I mean, there were, I think, 3 customers in both times. We had 4 agents on the floor. And so there has been a lot of positive movement where we would say that we're getting back towards from the migration to business as usual. That said, I think City Manager Garza and Mayor McCoy have talked about a need for additional communication with the city in terms of what we're doing, advanced notification of major initiatives, as well as outlining several projects that they have in mind to move the city forward, including providing broadband access for all, affordable broadband access for all. And so we talked Friday about an initiative that we have, which is Altice Advantage, which opens up, it's a low-cost broadband solution, includes a modem, and it's available for any family that's involved in the free school lunch program. We've recently expanded that to be available for all veterans, and there's some other groups that qualify for that. As city manager and Mayor McCoy both pointed out, they were glad to hear about that, but they wish there had been much more proactive communication on that. And so I hear them loud and clear. That's why I'm here today. And we're going to continue to stay in communication, address issues. As I said, I'll be coming back with the plan. So well, I'm here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come address you, and we'll be here if there's any questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. I think we appreciate very much that you came here to talk to us tonight. Thank you, sir. All right, any other citizens' communication? Seeing none, we'll move into the public hearings.
The first item is an ordinance amending Section 2-24 of the Victoria City Code to clarify that City Council has adopted Robert's Rules of Order as parliamentary procedure, repealing all conflicting ordinances, providing for codification and savings, and declaring an effective date. Mayor, I have a few slides on this. I will step down to the podium right quick. Okay. This should be brief, Mayor and Council. I have just a couple of slides to show you, but I did want to put the language up on the screen so everybody knew exactly what we were looking at. And I have more information on the next item on the agenda, so I thought it'd be better for me to just come down here for both of them. As we discussed at the last council meeting, City Code currently says that the rules of procedure stated in Robert's Rules of Order shall govern the proceedings of City Council, and that language is a bit misleading because it suggests that Robert's Rules of Order is somehow legally binding. The City Code of Ordinances is law, and so somebody might choose to say that the city law says we have to follow Robert's Rules to the letter. State courts do not interpret it that way. They believe that that Robert's Rules are merely parliamentary rules. And so in order to avoid misleading people, I'm recommending that we strike that phrase and add in instead the following language to say that those rules are hereby adopted as rules of parliamentary procedure for all meetings, except when they conflict with the provisions of city charter, code, or other ordinances. And so that's the change that I'm recommending today. That is what this ordinance does. And I'll happy to answer any questions. The last slide I'll put up, this is the clean copy of what it will look like in the code once we're done. Any questions?
Is that the conclusion report? If so, I'm going to open a public hearing on this matter. I'm now opening a public hearing on this matter. Anyone in the public that wants to speak to this, please step forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain discussion.
So is this an attempt to change how we operate up here?
No, sir, it's not.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that question. That's important for the public to know that we will still continue to follow Robert's Rules the same way that we have.
Further question then, because we're a small body, we currently we have chosen to follow Robert's Rules, but we're not obligated. And with this new change, we would still not be obligated, or perhaps even less strenuous than that, is that we could relax them if we chose to.
I agree with what you're saying. I want to clarify, though, that the small boards and section of Robert's Rules is still Robert's Rules. We still do follow that section. And it's not a free pass. You don't get to just willy-nilly do whatever you want to. But there is a provision that allows us to relax the rules because we're a small board. For example, normal Robert's Rules would require you each to stand up to address the chair when you would like to speak. Obviously, we don't do that.
Please do not. All right. Any further discussion?
We haven't called for the question yet. Nobody's mentioned, made a
Yeah,
motion.
we need a motion.
I move that we accept C1.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion on the matter?
Again, this is really just clarification. Even if this fails, nothing's really changed.
No. It's just the expectation that people don't that know that it's not a legally binding thing for us. So with that, I will call to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. The next item on the agenda is item C2, an ordinance amending section 2-24 of the Victoria City Code. I'm sorry, this is the item we just did. James,
I can read
this
it.
is the
An
next-
ordinance adopting a moratorium and prohibition on accepting, processing, or acting upon applications for any game room permits as described in section 14-146 of the Victoria City Code, extending the expiration date of all current active permits, suspending the operation of conflicting ordinances, declaring an emergency, providing for publication, enforcement, and savings, and declaring an effective date.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can get used to that.
Do you have any further thing on that matter, or may I open the public hearing?
You may open the public hearing. I do have a presentation, though. You
Well,
may
go
want
ahead
me
and
to
do the
that
public
first.
hearing, but I think we've.
You mean the
or
presentation?
the-
You want to do the presentation before the public hearing?
I think so, so that
Okay,
people
let's do that then.
understand that it gives the public an opportunity to see what's behind this and understand it before I open a public hearing and invite them to speak.
Yes, sir. So a quick reminder of how we got where we are. You'll remember that, there it is. The city currently does regulate game rooms within the city, and our regulation essentially states that you cannot operate a game room within the city unless you have a permit from the city. All of the current city-issued game room permits will expire on December 31st of this year. They are set up on an annual basis, and that was the normal operation. Our code also says that there is no continued expectation that you're going to get a new permit for the new year. Each year stands on its own. And I start with that background because I don't want anyone to think that we are taking something away from the existing game rooms. They knew going into this that their permit was for 1 year, and that at the end of the year, they would have to reapply under whatever new rules existed at that time. The county, as you know, is considering adopting game room regulations that would apply both in the city and the county. I've been working with the County Commissioners Court as well as their outside counsel. I thank them for the opportunity to give input on behalf of you, the city council members, to try to make sure that this is an ordinance that's going to work countywide, both for the city and the county. I have put at your dais a copy of the proposed county ordinance. It's fairly thick. It's about 20 pages. You can take it home and read it. It has been published in the sense that I believe they have notified in the paper that if any citizen would like to get a copy to review on their own, they can contact Commissioners Court and get a copy for them to review prior to Commissioners Court adopting that. Commissioners Court will be considering it mid-December, and they anticipate the effective date of that ordinance will be January 1st. The significance of that start date is that there is no overlap between the county ordinance and the city ordinance. Our permits will expire the last day of this year, and new permits will be issued by the county for January 1st of next year. The county game room ordinance, as drafted, will prohibit game rooms within the city limits of any incorporated municipality in the city. I believe we're the only one. That will effectively eliminate game rooms from the city of Victoria. And so the vast majority of the regulatory scheme that's being outlined here is designed to apply within the county and not within the city. In addition to the prohibition within the city limits, there are 1,500-foot setbacks from any residential neighborhood, 2,000-foot setbacks from any other two game rooms, all of which is intended to reduce the number of game rooms operating within the county. In addition to that, the county intends to provide that there shall be no more than 2 game rooms per precinct, so that would be 8 total in the county. In order to make sure that those are not lined up directly across the street from each other, they are also saying that they have to be a 2,000-foot setback from each other. As I said, I've been working with the county, and I'm pleased that they have taken our feedback. One of the items that they have included is the landlord's acknowledgement that we put into ours a year ago when we adopted our regulations, that requires a landlord to sign an acknowledgement that they understand there is a game room operating within that facility. We believed at the time, and I still believe, that that was an important enforcement mechanism. The moratorium that you're considering today is intended to prohibit the city from issuing new permits that would go into effect either for the remainder of this year or for at any time during the next year. We don't want businesses to expend unnecessary money applying for a permit that they're not going to be able to use. Remember, our permit fee is over $700. And so we don't want them to expend that money knowing they're not going to be able to get that permit. So there we go. The other thing that this moratorium does is it allows existing game rooms to continue to operate through the end of their permit, December 31st, 2019. Or we put a contingency in there. If the county regulations do not become effective on January 1st as they plan, for whatever reason, the existing game room permits will be extended until such time as the county regulations become effective. That's to allow the existing game rooms to apply for a county permit if they are eligible for that and to continue to operate during that meantime. As I say, we expect the county permits to become effective January 1st and for that contingency to not be necessary. Finally, I want to point out that the moratorium that you're considering does not affect enforcement of the existing regulations that are on the books. So if a game room is operating illegally, they can still be raided by the police department, they can still be shut down, we can still suspend their permit or revoke their permit. They are still subject to all of the same regulatory standards. The only thing that this moratorium does is prevent us from issuing a new permit from the effective date of this resolution. Finally, let me say, we're considering this as an emergency reading tonight. That means that we will consider it on only one reading and not three, and it requires the affirmative vote of 5 members of council in order to pass. The reason that we're doing that is because we want this moratorium to become effective immediately. I know that the game room operators are considering filing their new permit applications. I believe that there may even be one in process right now. We don't want to take their money if we don't have to. So we're asking for you to pass this on an emergency reading tonight. I'll take any questions you may have. Mayor, do you want to open for public comment now?
Any further questions of Mr. Gooch? If not, I'll open the public hearing on this matter. Anyone that wishes to speak to this matter, please step forward.
Good evening. My name is Clara Ramos, and my address is 1412 Anaqua. I would like for the city attorney to clarify, though, because he did say that they have until December the 31st to operate, but if the commissioners court is not ready yet, that they can extend to operate, is that correct? Is that what I hear? Okay, and so would they have to get a permit just to get that extension? Okay, okay, but first, we'll go to next. Okay, now, I don't understand how the city council can make any kind of decisions on what's going on out there and the livelihood of especially the elderly, because this is what the elderly do. They go to game rooms. I don't even know if any of y'all have ever stepped into a game room in order to make an effective decision. Have you? I'd like to know.
I've
Okay.
owned one.
You own one?
I've owned one, so I
Oh,
know.
okay.
I know that that's what happens to the
Yes.
people. And I don't know, can I talk to her?
I think in a
Okay.
public hearing, I think technically, yes, because it's a posted item.
Oh, okay. Okay, I just
Right.
wanted to make sure that I wasn't.
Okay, and also, I know that because a few of the bingo parlor business owners have come in and complained, but what makes them exempt from their game room machines? They have some. I'd like to know if they're gonna have to close their machines down also. There's a lot of things that, I don't think one reading, an emergency reading or whatever, one reading is good enough for this. I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of good information to bring to the floor. And they can't do it if y'all are pushing it as an emergency. So, I think that maybe a couple of readings before y'all make a final decision? Because, you know, there's a lot of senior citizens that use these game rooms just for entertainment. And y'all are trying to take them away and make them drive out in the county. You know, that doesn't make them any safer. And, you know, and another thing, there's Chuck E. Cheese, Pizza, what is it, Peter Piper's? They also operate with machines. I mean, what's the difference? There's a lot of these game rooms that operate and give prizes, you know, the $5 prizes or whatever, but I just don't understand it. I don't gamble, so I really don't have a dog in this fight, but I'm here for the little guy because a lot of them don't have that voice to come forward. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I think that y'all really do need to sit down and reconsider what's going on because, you know, yeah, you might say that there are illegal game rooms, and I don't disagree with that. I'm sure there are. But then you have those that aren't. So because of a few bad apples, everybody's going to pay the price. So, you know, I'm just here because I'd like to see the council, you know, make a little reconsideration on what's going on. I mean, that's
Well,
all I have to say.
If I may, and this might be a
Sure.
question to you, Mr. Gooch, to answer Ms. Ramos. What we're doing tonight is basically placing a moratorium on what we do until the county takes action, correct? I mean, we're not stating one way or the other what we're doing. I mean, and the thing that I would ask tonight is, do we really have any control? I know we have talked with council, with the county, but does the county have authority to supersede us with their ordinance? If they would move forward with their statutory powers, they could pass an ordinance that would outlaw game rooms in Victoria, the city of Victoria, correct? And we have no say on it.
To answer your first question, Mayor, the answer is yes. This moratorium is only considering what we will do in the interim until the county regulations go into effect. With regards to your second question, I've been making a note of all of the questions that are coming up here during public comment, and I'll address them all collectively once public comment is over, and any other questions from council members as well.
But for the benefit of your concern tonight, Ms. Ramos, what we're doing tonight isn't really changing, we're just saying we need to sit tight until we see what the county does.
Right.
So,
But he did say that it was like an emergency.
well, it's an
and
emergency reading because we
y'all.
need to put that moratorium in place so that we discourage people from spending money to us that may end up being wasted money on their part. That's the way I understand it.
See, because
Correct.
I have a problem with the city issuing permits, you know, if they knew that there were illegal gambling rooms, I mean, why issue the permits in the first place?
Well, we don't issue permits
They did.
to people to take illegal actions. That's why we adopted ordinances that gave us the opportunity to step in and shut down operations that weren't operating legally. I don't think anybody under our court ordinance has any problem with a legally operated game room in the city of Victoria.
Right. And how do you distinguish who's legal and illegal?
I would
how do you
assume
find-
that it's up to law enforcement to do that, and we gave them the tools to do that. But now what has happened is that the county was given power and regulation authority in the last session of the legislature. I believe that it went into effective September of this year, correct, Mr. Gooch? And so they're taking action under their new authority to do what they're doing. So part of what we're doing is to make sure that what they do is hopefully no conflict with what we do. And I'm still going to wait for Mr. Gooch to confirm whether or not that they have, their ordinance would have supersede anything that we've passed. So, but I do want to assure you that I think what we're doing tonight simply places a moratorium so that people don't spend money with us in order to have it go away if, based upon what the county does.
So if they did, would it be reimbursed?
Well,
If it
we're
came
just
to that?
saying, don't give us a permit until we see what the county does. I would assume that if the county would just say, we're not doing anything at their meeting, then we would just go toward business as usual. Mr. Gusher, would we have to come back and rescind our moratorium?
Let me also address that once we get through the public
Okay.
comment section. Let's
All
go
right.
ahead and let's see if anyone else has any other comments, and then we can address those all at the same time.
Mr. Goosh, if you'd add to that list something that I asked last time, but I want you to repeat again, that if we adopt this moratorium, that the permits will continue on into next year if the
Right.
county does not adopt this ordinance before.
Yes.
I have one more comment, though.
Right.
Also, I saw on there where it says about the owners of any building, that they were going to be held responsible. Okay, I mean, I don't know how you can do that if, a lot of times, if you're a renter or an owner and you rent, it's like renting a house. If you rent a house, do you know that that house is going to turn into a crack house later on down the line?
If I may, the reason that was put into the ordinance that the city adopted is because under state law, that owner's responsible anyway. And we felt compelled to just have them acknowledge that for us giving them an opportunity to understand that when they enter into a lease, that they can be held accountable under state law. It is not something that the city has imposed upon anyone. It's simply the city making a person aware that you may be at legal peril when you lease your property to someone who then ultimately breaks the law in a gaming situation. That was the purpose of it. It's simply as an acknowledgement that we're telling you that the city does not impose that law. It was imposed by the legislature.
Well, maybe that needs to be cleared up a little bit, because it seems like the way it reads like, the city is holding that
No, ma'am.
owner.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
It's just we're trying to be helpful to people to let that person know that when you lease your property, you can be held accountable under a state law that exists. We could say nothing about it and let somebody suffer the consequence. We just felt compelled that under our ordinance that we wanted everybody to understand what their peril could be.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope y'all consider them old folks, though.
Okay. Thank you
I'm
very.
headed that way.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ramos. Any other comments during the public hearing?
Yes, sir. My name is Russell Moya. I'm commenting on what's been going on the past couple of weeks with the news and advertising of these game room deals. There's a guy that came on the news, I believe he's a judge, siding with this bingo. I mean, most people that go to game rooms don't have enough money to go to bingos. I mean, going to the bingos, it's costs you $100, $200 just to buy the game, and then you got to pay $12 to eat a hamburger, Coke. I mean, and they're using the veterans for the bingo, and that's not right. I mean, Peter Piper does it, Chuck E. Cheese does it, Outlaw Pass does it. Why are these people doing it? I mean, and another thing, y'all got to consider the people that are doing right and the people that are doing bad. I mean, you got to separate them, and y'all coming to that. So the people that are operating, maybe you should have them grandfathered in, or not just completely do away with them in the city. Maybe there's 1, 2, 3 of them that are open still that have been doing right. Maybe grandfather them in. Maybe you could consider that. Also, the drugs, the prostitution, and all the robberies, it's going to happen anyway, anywhere. You shut down the game rooms, it's just going to move on to the next place. It's a nonstop situation there. And I'm just asking you to consider, I mean, when you make your vote, consider the elderly and consider the righteousness. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. I didn't know we were on
Welcome,
Trump
Mr.
testimony or what. Nonetheless, my name is Hernan Hasso, and I live at 108 Sagemont Avenue here in Victoria. I've been a resident of Victoria for about 3 years since Harvey displaced me from Goliad. I'm the former mayor of the city of Goliad and really tried through 53 years of service to Goliad County, or the city, to do what's best for the public, which was way behind time, and really and truly, it still is. They have problems. I'm 75 years old, so I joined that senior group that we've been talking about. And I go to game rooms. It's not a necessity. I just enjoy the hell out of it. But I'll tell you what, this state, if we had guts at the top, with those 5 people that are keeping this issue from getting a vote, from bringing it out of committees and putting it onto the vote, we'd have gambling. You could do it anywhere. All of it's going to Louisiana, going to Las Vegas. I think that the body of the city and the body of the county have got to get together to decide what all these rules are. And the city has an obligation to do what is right for the city, not necessarily push it off to the county. Oh, it'll get covered. These people are making a decent living. We know that. Do you think I care? There's people in city government that are making a lot of money. There are people in the county government that are making a lot of money. Read the Advocate. You've got to come down to that level to be right with those that are trying to make that living. And not every game room is going to turn into a doggone gambling place that has killers, murderers, rapists, all this bull. You've got to meet them halfway. And I encourage you to consider it deeply and strongly to do what's right for your people and myself as a new citizen. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Mr. Goosh, if you would kind of sum up the points brought up in the discussion, please.
Yes, sir, thank you. I almost stole James's pen there. I had to give it back to him. There were several questions brought up during public comment. Let me address each of them. Before I do so, I would like to, for the purpose of the public who are watching at home on TV and who may not have the background of this story, I want to clarify the difference between what the county is doing and what the city is doing tonight or considering doing tonight. The county is adopting regulations to regulate game rooms within the county and in the city. They have the authority to do that. That was granted to them by the state legislature. It is the county's action, which we have no control over, that is pushing this issue forward today. Whether or not the city adopts a moratorium tonight, the county intends to adopt game room regulations. Your action tonight that you're being asked to consider is not a question of whether or not game rooms will be considered to operate within the city or the county. That is a question that is being taken up by the county. Tonight, we're merely asking you to consider whether or not we should continue to issue new permits to people, knowing that they'll only be able to use them for a month and a half. That's what the moratorium issue is. We're getting ready to come to the end of the permit cycle, and we would prefer not to issue a game room permit to someone knowing that they are likely not going to be able to use it. That being said, let me go back to the questions that were raised as I wrote them down, and I was madly scribbling, so if I got something wrong, I'm sure someone will correct me. The first question was whether or not the moratorium would close down the existing game rooms, and it will not. Those who are currently operating will continue to operate. that will happen even after January 1st, despite the fact that those game rooms were scheduled to lose their permits on December 31st. If the county has not yet adopted regulations, the existing permits will continue to operate into the new year with no further action necessary on their part. We don't want to deprive those people of the opportunity to continue to operate merely because of a delay in adopting regulations on the county's part. I do expect that those regulations will be effective January 1st. This is merely belt and suspenders. It's just a contingency plan for what happens in case they don't get that deadline met. There was a question about Chuck E. Cheese and similar operations, businesses in town that have various different types of machines that may or may not count. Let's be clear. The game rooms we're talking about here are what people can call eight-liners. They are essentially slot machines. Those are the machines that are being regulated. The type of machine that you would see at Chuck E. Cheese or Dave & Buster's, if we had one, is what the state calls an amusement redemption machine. It's a completely different class of machine, and they are not included in this. In fact, if you read the county's proposed regulation, they specifically carve out amusement redemption machines, and that will allow businesses like Chuck E. Cheese to continue to operate. And if anyone's listening, allow Dave & Buster's to come to Victoria. That was my attempt at economic development for the evening, Mayor. Likewise, there was a question asked about bingo parlors. There is an exception within the county's proposed regulation that would allow bingo parlors to continue to have games, eight-liner machines within their bingo parlors. Mayor, you asked whether the county regulations would supersede city regulations, and I wish the answer were as simple as that. It's not. Both the city and the county have independent authority to pass legislation in this area, and where those two laws happen to conflict with each other, we will have difficulty interpreting the two of them. I intend, after the beginning of this next calendar year, to bring back an ordinance that effectively removes our ordinance from the books so that there is no question of a conflict between those two ordinances. I don't anticipate there being a conflict because our regulations apply only within the city limits, and their regulation simply says there will be no more game rooms within the city limits. So there will be no permits issued in the city once the county regulations take effect. So I don't anticipate there being a conflict. Finally, there was a question about the acknowledgement that the landlords sign, and Mayor, you're correct in explaining that that acknowledgement does not create any additional liability on the part of the landlord. It's intended to make sure that the landlords are aware that they are taking on liability that already exists under state law. Some of those landlords have expressed to me their concern that they wouldn't have that liability if they leased their facility to a restaurant or a mobile home park or some other type of business, and they're correct about that. This is a provision in state law that specifically says if you lease your facility to a gaming house, someone who does break the law and gamble illegally, then you as the landlord are liable for that. We included that provision in our code to help ensure that those landlords would be aware of that provision. And I know of many landlords who chose not to allow game rooms to operate because they did not want to take that liability on. Prior to that time, they were unaware that they had that legal exposure. So I think that's a good provision, and I hope the county will continue to use it. Any other questions you may have, Council?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the difference between the bingo and the game rooms? Are they governed by different rules and if you're combining eight-liner machines in a bingo hall, why are they being the exception to the county? Somebody's talking to somebody, and somebody needs to go before the county commissioners and voice their opinion. Okay? Please do, because there's no difference from their eight-liners to your eight-liners, because I've been there. I've played them. They're the exact same machines. Okay? So I can't do it, but you can do it. What we're voting on today is totally different, But the thing is that there is no difference And somebody needs to make the county aware of it. It's just that the guy with the bingo, he's right there at Ben's ear, okay? I saw it myself. You need to go and talk to Ben, okay? And that's not all. They are allowed within the city limits. The bingo halls are inside the city limits with machines. So somebody needs to bring that up.
Point of
Yes.
clarification, public hearing's closed, correct?
Yes, but I look at
Okay.
this as the discussion
And-
of us in deliberation, so.
Public hearing's closed, and the topic needs to stay on moratorium. We're not here to say we're changing any regulations with bingo halls or with eight-liner game rooms. Point of order.
Well,
Mayor, as in a
Mr.
response
Balknight's
to.
correct, the public hearing is closed on the
Thank you.
matter. I would strongly urge people, though, to exercise their right, because it seems like the ball is in the county's court right now. And I think that I would encourage everybody to go voice their opinions to the county with the same vigor as you've spoken here tonight. And from what I understand in this moratorium, we are simply voting on a moratorium tonight. And you mentioned the point that you could come back to us at a later date to rescind our ordinance. We always have the power not to rescind it if we so choose. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think that people should exercise their civic right and duty to go express their opinions to those who, at the moment, seem to have the upper hand in this situation. I would encourage you to do so. But I would like to move again on forward tonight with what we have before us, which I understand will not affect in any way that argument with the county, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So what I heard you say is, should the county go ahead with their decision, we have no course of action. We have no recourse, because they will more or less have the authority over the city government.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I move we adopt item C2.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second to adopt item C2? Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. We'll move forward to item
Item C3 is an
C3.
ordinance amending the 2019-2020 budget of the city of Victoria and carrying forward encumbrances outstanding at September 30th, 2019, declaring an emergency, repealing all conflicting ordinances, providing for savings, and declaring an effective date.
So tonight, the encumbrances that are being carried forward are essentially just purchase orders and contracts that were undelivered as of September 30th of 2019. So these items are being carried forward to be recorded in the 2020 budget. I just want to point out that the funding for these encumbrances was appropriated in the fiscal 19 budget, so this does not represent a new commitment of funds. The pie chart that I handed out earlier, and that's up on the screen now, just trying to illustrate that most of these amounts that are being rolled forward in the encumbrances are related to construction projects for street and utilities, as well as some pretty large vehicle purchases that were still outstanding at the end of the year. If you have any questions regarding this item, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any further questions before I open a public hearing? If not, I will open a public hearing on this matter. Anyone in the public wanting to speak to this item, please step forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. I would like to entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to adopt item C3.
Can I
Any
just ask
further
a point for
discussion?
clarification? Have we always had a public hearing for this?
That I could not answer.
I'm certain.
question
we
was
have. I
if
would
we've
have to
always done a
look back.
public hearing
I
for this
didn't
item.
review these in the past, but this is always done by ordinance. It's typically done an emergency reading ordinance,
I
and
remember
ordinances always
that.
require a public hearing. So I'm going to say yes.
It just seemed like.
I have a question. Why is it always an emergency?
That,
I mean, do we have to pay the bills right away, or?
Unless someone's made in the math there, I don't think there's.
that's my question
Gotta
too,
change.
because it's
That's
bringing
an
something
excellent
forward.
question. Let me just back up. I'm giving you from an account perspective. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll give you my legal opinion. So I need to qualify that. Every year we go through this process. Yes, you will know. I'm gonna give you some background. In 19, we have, council goes appropriate money for a contract or purchase order that services have not been rendered by September 30th. So we have a legal obligation on our hands. The money has been allocated and assigned to and extracted out from their budget. At the budget process, what you see is a clean budget, new appropriation. These funds are not even in there, okay? But keep in mind, from a legal perspective, from an accounting side, I have an obligation to pay these legal documents as they come due when service is provided, which I have paid some in October already, because I have a legal obligation. What we're doing here tonight, I get to your question. We need to do, it's a more of a transparency. I have to show those numbers coming into the budget so I can reflect the expenses and everything accordingly, because it'd be kind of weird. I don't show an encouragement, but I'm showing you expense, or am I hiding money on the side? I have everything full loaded here. I'm going to show you the 2020 budget, and on top of that, I'm going to show you 2019. Why an emergency? Well, it's a good question. You go back to the chart, it doesn't say anything about emergency at all when it comes to this portion. It only strictly talks about items that have been appropriated, you put that aside. Anything that's unencumbered, you roll it over, or you have a new amendment with that fiscal year appropriation, you do a budget amendment, which you do 1, 2, and 3. This item, and Thomas and I have been talking about this item, well, how maybe we don't need to move forward. But from an accounting perspective, I like to show it from a transparency, that I'm bringing this forward and moving it forward so everybody can see it accordingly. Can we do it 3 readings? Fine, but I'm still gonna pay those bills, even though you're gonna take 3 readings. We have a fully legal obligation to make these bills. I need to pay them. I hope I answered that question, but it comes down to a simple answer, it's transparency. I need to show these right now and move on. Pull the Band-Aid off. Or we can do a 3 reading, which to me doesn't make sense, all due respect. Just take care of it, move on from the accounting perspective and budgetary perspective, and go forward. I hope I didn't muddy up the water there.
Well, it wouldn't be 3 readings, it would be 2 readings.
The one thing that I would add to
I
that.
stand corrected.
The one thing that I would add to that is that the word emergency is used in our code, and that's almost an unfortunate word. It merely designates that there is a need to take action faster than 3 readings. There is no standard in our code for what constitutes an emergency. In other words, this doesn't have to be a public disaster before we can call it an emergency. The code simply says that if it is an emergency, we have to state the nature of the emergency, and that's what Gilbert is doing.
That's what I'm doing. I like to call it something else if you want to, but other than that, it's not per se the emergency that we always used to.
Well, I have a question. The new fiscal year started October 1.
Yes, ma'am.
This is November 19.
Yes, ma'am.
Now it's an emergency, when, all joking aside. Couldn't we have done this or had these numbers sooner?
Excellent question. Let me tell you what happens. By the end of September and during the first couple of weeks in October, we're still cleaning up outstanding POs that we got to make sure these are legitimate or there's still obligation. Or there's a time gap there. So we take a whole month of October to make sure all these are legitimate. We might have POs that were carried over from last year, from 18 to 19, and we have zeros out because it's done, or we cut off the service or something happened throughout the year. We got to clean all those up. There's a timing frame. That's all it is, Ms. Scott. I don't know if there's an accountant in this city of Texas that can get you an encumbrance list on October 1st. You need to hire them.
No different than a private business that has to close their year-end books.
They carry that over.
IRS gives you 30 days before you submit any documentation. It takes some time to make sure you got your documentation right.
So it's all these good questions, and it'll probably come up again. That's fine. That's why we're here. Keeps us on our toes.
Gilbert, this is money that was already encumbered in
That's correct, ma'am.
2019. So it's not like we're pulling more money out of 2020.
No, ma'am. That's why I made the point that when you see that budget,
Mm-hmm.
it's strictly money that we're going to generate this coming year and appropriation, new appropriation that will be done through this fiscal year. All of these, y'all have approved the PO, the contracts, everything's done. It's sealed. So technically, I got a legal obligation sitting out here. The only thing I'm doing now, more of a bookkeeping, cleaning up. I got to bring it forward and move forward for transparency so I can show it in the budget and everything else. But legally, I have to pay them October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, whatever.
I move to approve item C3.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item C3. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
I was going to say on the bright note, it requires 5 votes, and so
Well,
the emergency requires more.
and we got 7, so we're in good stead.
We're good to
Got
go.
7.
Mayor, would you like to approve the minutes before we do the consent
If you
agenda?
don't mind.
Sure. So item
quickly.
D1 is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 5th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to remove the minutes. I will choose to abstain from this vote since I wasn't at the last meeting. So I will call for the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same.
There are 5 other items remaining on the consent agenda tonight. They are first, an ordinance amending Table 3.1 in Section 21-92 of the Victoria City Code to ease parking requirements for hair and nail salons, repealing conflicting ordinances, providing for publication, enforcement, codification, and savings, and declaring an effective date. Item D3 is a resolution approving the purchase of a Hazmat ID Elite handheld FTIR chemical identifier for the Victoria Fire Department's Regional Hazardous Materials Response Team from Far West in the amount of $59,950 and declaring an effective date. Item D4 is a resolution approving the purchase of protective clothing for Victoria Fire Department from Municipal Emergency Services Incorporated in the amount of $87,744, authorizing the city manager to execute all documents necessary to complete the purchase and declaring an effective date. Item D5 is an ordinance repealing Sections 24-32 and 24-33 of the Victoria City Code to eliminate certain fees collected by the municipal court that will now be collected under state law, repealing conflicting ordinances, providing for codification and savings, and declaring an effective date. And finally, D6 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to pay $114,324.67 to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for the annual consolidated water quality assessment fee for the city's wastewater treatment plants and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
We moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. I don't think there's any need for discussion. If there is, please speak. Hearing none, I will ask to vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Item E1 is a resolution casting votes for the appointment of a member of the Victoria City Council to the Victoria Central Appraisal District Board of Directors and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I think we have a presentation.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay. So the resolution is asking the city council to cast the votes for the City of Victoria's votes for the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. We used to do that in one resolution where we appointed a member of council to serve on that board and cast the votes at the same time. And this time, Thomas and I chose to separate it out so y'all could see the entire election process. So the election process begins with the chief appraiser delivering the voting entitlement by October 1st. And then by October 15th, we have to have a meeting and nominate one candidate. And we have to turn that in by October 15th, which is why we had that special meeting on the 14th, if you'll remember. And we did nominate Mr. Bucknight. And by October 30th, the ballot is prepared and distributed by to the voting entities, which that was done. A letter was sent to Mr. Garza as well as Mayor McCoy. And then, so that's the point that we're at in this process, is that we need to now cast the votes and return by resolution to the chief appraiser. And there's also an official ballot that Mayor McCoy has to sign. And then they will look at the candidates and decide who has the 5 most votes, and that's declared the elected, and they will notify each of the entities. So the board candidates are Councilman Bucknight, Commissioner Yannick, Michael Craig Mercer, Trustee Margaret Pruitt from VISD, Bill Russell, and Lou Swetlick. And this is a breakdown of the votes that each voting entity gets. The 839 votes that we give is roughly 16.7% of the total votes. And you can see that VISD does have the most with 2,561 votes. The casting of the votes is done by the governing body. And you can cast all your votes for one candidate, or you can distribute the votes among the candidates. And historically, the city of Victoria has cast all of its votes for one city council member and that they've nominated to be on the board. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Can you tell us who nominated each of the candidates?
That information was not given to us. I could make a guess, but of course, probably the county elected Mr. Yannick, and Ms. Pruitt was probably selected by VISD.
Mr. Mercer also.
Mr. Mercer?
Mr. Mercer's a trustee also.
So I would guess that they're.
I'm just curious. I don't know where they come from.
I do know that several of them
Never asked before.
have served on that board for years.
I guess that leaves Bill Russell and Lou Svetlik. We don't know who nominates them.
I do not.
Okay.
So there's only be five?
Want to give up some of your
Okay.
votes?
I'm just curious. I just,
No, Mayor and Council, there is no ballot for you to consider tonight. It has been the practice of the city to cast all 839 votes for our nominee in order to ensure that our nominee gets elected to that board. There is, of course, some strategy at play here. If you choose to split your votes, you could choose to nominate for someone else. But traditionally, we nominate and then cast all of our votes for that nominee.
So by voting for this resolution, we are casting all 839 votes for our candidate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So we just needed to pass the resolution.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, the resolution's before us. I think it has been moved and seconded. Am I correct?
Yes.
Therefore, I will ask for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Thank you. Congratulations.
Got 800 votes.
Thank you for your service.
Resolution appointing one new member and reappointing 4 current members of the Food Establishment Appeals Board and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
second.
We have a motion and a second for item E2. Any discussion on that matter? Being none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, same sign.
All right, item E3 is a resolution approving the optional redemption of the City of Victoria, Texas pass-through toll revenue and limited tax bonds, Series 2011, maturing on August 15th, 2021 through August 15th, 2025, calling such maturities for early redemption, approving and authorizing the execution and performance of all documents and procedures related thereto, and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I believe Mr. Yannick has some presentation for us.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, the item we're presenting is redemption of the 2021 through 2025 outstanding maturities on the bonds that were issued to fund the TxDOT overpass project, which included the construction of the overpasses at Salem Road and Mockingbird Lane. This agreement was entered into in 2011 between the city and TxDOT with the total project cost of $18 million. It was funded by the city by issuing $9.7 million in bonds as well as $6.2 million in local funds. As a part of this agreement, TxDOT reimbursed the city 12 cents for each vehicle mile traveled between the two overpasses annually. The reimbursement had a maximum annual amount and a maximum overall amount over the life of the agreement. So TxDOT proposed an amendment to this contract, which essentially allowed them to buy themselves out of the agreement by paying off the net present value of the maximum remaining payoff balance, which came out to be just under $9.6 million, which council passed in July of this year. We received that payment in August, and the plan for those funds was in part to pay off the remaining balance of the TxDOT bonds, which amount to about $3.2 million, including interest. At this time, and the terms of the agreement, the maturities that could be called started in 2021, so that's why we're not redeeming the 2020 bond tonight. So the 2021 to 2025 maturities, including interest, total just over $2.7 million. And then the August 2020 maturity of about $480,000 will be paid in August when it is due. Overall, from the original agreement, paying off these bonds over this time frame will result in interest savings of about $2.4 million. And the original bond had been issued over 20 years. We had a redemption plan that would have paid it off in 11, but by doing this tonight, we'll be paying it off in 9 years. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions?
To approve item E3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item E3. If we have any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Item E4 is a resolution expressing the City Council's dissatisfaction to the Public Utilities Commission regarding customer service provided by Suddenlink Communication on behalf of the citizens of City of Victoria and declaring an effective date.
To accept item E4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept item E4. Any discussion on this matter?
I have a question. What is this going to accomplish?
I think it's going to accomplish that the city of Victoria listens to its citizens and are concerned about their concerns. And we all know that the franchising authority that the cities used to have in this matter was taken away in 2005, I believe, if I'm correct in that. It was grandfathered until 2014. The state took that ability away from the city to have any say in what these companies do within our right-of-ways. So it's a way for us, as the elected representatives of our citizens, to express their concern and their dissatisfaction on behalf of them to the state through, I think the resolution reads that we will express that to our representative, Ms. Morrison, and to Ms. Colcorst, our senator, and it will be passed on to the Public Utilities Commission, who issues those franchises, I believe, correct?
And
So
Mayor,
it's
I have a very brief presentation that's basically going to cover exactly what you just said. If you'd like for me to cover the background of this
Well,
again.
if I may, since I'm talking about it, because I'll mention this later on. I do want to commend Mr. Nance for coming here tonight. We did have a very good meeting with him. I was very encouraged by what we were told. But as at that meeting, I think I expressed to him, I think the city needs to do what the city needs to do, and Suddenlink needs to do what Suddenlink needs to do in response to this. And even if we vote for this resolution tonight, I'm going to be very receptive to working with Suddenlink to help them and encourage them to resolve their issues with the city. And I will be the first person to come back at a later date if their efforts prove valid, and ask you to allow us to send a letter of expressing what they are doing to take care of our citizens. And it is just a matter of voicing the dissatisfaction of our citizens and being a voice for them.
Well, and that's really what my question is, because at the last meeting, Mr. Gooch told us the procedures and who to voice the issues to. And I'm just not certain that a resolution from the city meets exactly what he said, but I'm not for 100% sure. That's why I'm asking whether this, I recognize that we have been receptive to our citizens. There's a lot of problems. I don't disagree with any of that, but if we're going to pass this resolution and think we did our thing and not be doing the right procedure.
I think the citizens would appreciate it.
I think that was the direction we gave the attorney, and that's why he brought it forward.
That was the direction.
That was the direction we gave him.
I'd like to hear his presentation.
Mr. Gooch, please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. This is a brief recap of the presentation that I gave at the last city council meeting. For those people who may not have seen it, it is available on YouTube if someone would like to go back and review that. I am not going to do the whole presentation over. I do, however, want to point out the salient points, as Mayor McCoy has already mentioned. For starters,
There we go. I want to remind everyone that cities in Texas do not regulate cable TV through local franchise agreements. That is a common misunderstanding because it used to be true, but it is no longer the case. Cities in Texas are not allowed to regulate cable TV companies through local franchise agreements. Those local franchises are issued by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. They are now called a SICFA, which is a state-issued certificate of franchise authority. The PUC issues those SICFAs to cable TV operators who then get to operate within specific jurisdictions. The PUC does not respond to consumer complaints regarding those SICFAs because the SICFA merely is a license for the company to operate within that jurisdiction. It does not include customer service standards. As we discussed 2 weeks ago, the FCC, of course, does have customer service standards that they apply to cable television industries, and the FCC, the federal government, asks the local franchise authority, in this case that's the state of Texas, to enforce those standards. And so what we are doing through this resolution, you remember that last week I said, despite Mayor McCoy's absence, he asked me to promote the idea of bringing back this resolution, and as you have correctly stated, that was the direction given to me by council at the last meeting, was to bring back a resolution. This resolution would express on behalf of City Council the dissatisfaction and try to bring to the PUC's attention that the citizens believe that their customer service standards are not being met. It requests the commissioners of the Public Utility Commission to enforce those customer service standards that have been set forth. And it instructs me to distribute a copy of this resolution to our state representative, Jeannie Morrison, our state senator, Lois Kolkhorst, and each of the 3 PUC commissioners, including the chair, Deanne T. Walker, and commissioners Arthur DeAndrea and Shelley Botkin. So if you pass this resolution, I think the intent and the effect of it will be to try to raise awareness at the state level of the concerns of the citizens on the local level.
Any further questions? I think we've had a motion and a second. With
I
that-
just want to say one thing, and thank you, Mr. Nance. It's not a fun evening to come up here and speak. I do realize that I was one that brought it up the first time, and everybody here has experienced issues. And I just want to relay that it's not only the customer service side. If a fair product was being delivered on what was promised, there wouldn't be the need for all the customer service calls. And so I implore you to please look at the actual product that's being delivered and what's being promised, and make sure we get that right, and I think it'll help you on your customer service side.
Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
And once again, Mr. Nance, thank you so much for coming here, and we do look forward to working with you to help resolve these issues, and thank you again.
That takes us to item E5, which is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Infrastructure Management Services, LLC, to perform a street paving assessment in the amount of $87,977 and declaring an effective date. And Mayor and Council, I want to point out that we have put into your packet, your read file today, a substituted version of this contract. There was a provision that had been left out of the contract that included the customer service standards. The standards of service that are being provided by the engineers on this project, that is a provision that we neglected to include on the first draft, and we added that provision. IMS has executed the corrected version of the contract. We've included it in your read file, I believe, and that is the version we are asking you to authorize us to execute today.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion, please. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
And a second. Now, Mr. Reese, if you want to speak to it.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thomas stole the clicker.
First, it was a pen.
Now it's getting bigger.
Jeff Myers with IMS is here, and he's going to come up in a minute to do a presentation. But before he does, I wanted to give a little background so that as a refresher to council and then kind of some general information to the public. Historically, the city of Victoria has performed a street inventory using a method that is somewhat subjective and a little bit inconsistent in that we typically drive the streets to assess them using just a visual method. You know, are there potholes? There's alligator cracking. We've seen some road failures, and then from that we assign a rating to it. And I say it's subjective because we're human, and so the people that are doing that, it's up to them how bad they think it is. And there's some inconsistency because one year we'll use an intern to do it, the next year we'll use one of our in-house engineers, and it just doesn't make a good model. So we've gone out and we've looked at some services, and we're asking you to consider this product from IMS. IMS is a much more scientific. They have a lot of technology that to use to assess these pavements. I'm not going to try to explain it all, but I know they use high-definition cameras, laser arrays, and some deflection testing to do what they do, and then they bring all that back to you in a report. So without getting into too much detail, I'm going to ask Jeff to come up here now and explain all of that to you very scientifically.
Jeff, and if you don't mind, I just want to add briefly that this also helps our cause in formalizing our CIP development process. You're going to begin hearing us as staff incorporate more of the principles that came out of a comprehensive plan, the Victoria 2035 plan. And one of the recommendations from the infrastructure standpoint in that specific plan was to formalize our CIP process. And so you've heard me talk about formalizing through studies like these, or formalizing the CIP process in terms of making it about more than just streets. So there's a lot of components that fall under this formalizing the CIP process. And so it's important to note that part of what we're doing is not only doing what Donald said, but we're adhering to an outline that was approved by council a few years ago. And you're going to start hearing more about that in the near future. But in any case, sir, go ahead.
Thanks. I appreciate the city having me up for a few minutes. I don't know if I can follow some of the lively discussion with the exciting world of pavement management, but I'll do my best. My name is Jeff Myers, and I work with Infrastructure Management Services. I'm the Midwest Director, so I cover everything from South Dakota to Texas. I wanted to talk a little bit, I came into Victoria early today so I could kind of drive around and at least get some initial assumptions. But we also prepared some data, and I want to talk a little bit about what the city of Victoria has in its pavement network. Just a few facts. You have about 231 centerline miles of pavement. That equates to about 3.65 million square yards of pavement. I haven't run the numbers from the Victoria budget, but my strong assumption is it's the largest single asset the city owns, probably the most visible. And it's a unique asset in that it cannot be divested. It can't be depreciated and sold. Excuse me, as long as there's a city of Victoria, you're going to own the roads. So the question becomes, how do you maintain that asset the most cost effectively? That's kind of where we come in. We work in a field called pavement management. To make things very simple, my way. Thank you. To make things real simple, there's a couple of reasons to do pavement management. The first one is just the nature of the animal. We call this the 40-15 rule. When you put a new street in the city, over the first 40% of the life of that pavement, it really deteriorates very little, about 15%. However, in the next 15% of that pavement's life, it depreciates very rapidly, about 40%. And you can see the curve kind of winding down. The point of that being the initial maintenance on a pavement is relatively inexpensive. As it slides further down that curve, the rehabilitation cost per square yard gets dramatically more infeasible. So what we do in effect is try to, what we call kicking that curve out to the right. We let the pavement deteriorate to a sustainable level, then we rehab it before it drops any further and try to maintain it along the top of that curve. We offer a very tailored approach. IMS has been around for about 35 years. This is really all that we do. We've worked with well over 1,000 municipalities in the last 35 years. So we follow some very specific steps. The first thing we would do is come in and consume the city's GIS, what we call your centerline files, and develop maps to determine what you actually own and what you actually maintain. There will be state-maintained roads coming through the city. Obviously, you don't want to spend money on those. Then we start to define that network. What's a 2-lane road? What's a 4-lane road? What's a heavily trafficked road? Where's your construction and heavy equipment traveling most? And try to assign those attributes to the network. Then we'll send a specialized vehicle in that'll drive every mile of the pavement in Victoria. It's equipped with a laser array, high-speed digital cameras. The difference between how we do it and how you're doing it now is simply the fact that we're not making any assumptions. We're just collecting scientific observations that we report to you. Once we get that information developed, the tricky part becomes merging that condition data with what's specific to the city. What initiatives does the city have? What priorities does the city have to develop a comprehensive analysis? And then we begin the tedious work of developing that analysis to your approval. We have a very strong approach to surveys. We have the latest in technology. We do continuous surveys, which means we're examining every foot of pavement. They're all standardized to what we call ASTM D6433 standards, which is industry standard. We pick up the curvature and crown, and then we report that in a way that the city Public Works Department can consume it the most effectively. We start dispersing that data, which is a mountain of data, into a format that's easily manipulatable and understandable by the city. We're safe in that we're in a contained vehicle, and we can average generally between 30 and 40 miles a day.
Can you back up to that last slide, because that was.
Oh, sure.
It
I want to say to you, I'm a pretty informal guy. Stop me at any time.
It's really just out of curiosity, but that vehicle has equipment, cameras on the lane that it's on. So will it read the entire road, or will you drive each lane?
It can read 2 lanes.
Can read
so for
2
your
lanes.
4-lane
Okay.
roads, we have to go up and back 2 pass. So
That-
generally, residential areas, yes, in 1 pass.
Okay, that's actually kind of helpful, because if somebody says, well, it's messy on one side of the road and not the other, and they didn't drive on that side, so it picks up 2 lanes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Now, we also will look at what's underneath the pavement, what's not visible. And we employ a separate fleet of vehicles to come out and pull what we call a falling deflectometer. That applies a non-damaging load on a pavement, measures the reverberations, and we determine the strength of what's underneath the structure of the roadway. That comes in handy because you can see from this graph, this is in Branson, Missouri. At times, and I've talked to your team about this and some of the sections in Victoria, but at times you'll see very good surface conditions and very bad subsurface conditions. And what that does is allows you to prioritize what's more important to rehab in a given year. It's a very much more accurate measure. And guys, I'm really plowing through these because in the interest of your time, feel free to stop me at any time. The vehicle also will mount actually up to 8 now high-speed digital cameras. So we're taking footage as we roll. That comes in handy, A, from a quality control standpoint. If we have a section of road that the city disputes, we can pull up footage and review it together and show you exactly what we're looking at. So we record every mile of pavement in the city also. And that's all linked to your GIS seamlessly. Everything we do will link through the city's GIS. We also have the ability to develop other assets that the city might own. These can vary from signs, fire hydrants, traffic signals. We've even done trees. We develop it from the footage, plot it all up in a symbolized color database that again will link to the Public Works GIS system. So you can monitor and control other assets that you're responsible for. And again, it's delivered as a geodatabase. As we develop that data, when I talk, I say generally we have 2 big picture deliverables. We have a lot of the deliverables, but big picture too. We want to take a current assessment of your pavement condition as of this point in time. Frankly, there are several companies that can do that just as effectively as we can. We're very good at it. That's science and technology. The more important deliverable is what we leave behind. What do you do with that data after we're gone? How do you use that data to make financial decisions? How do you make it relatable to your reports? And what we're planning on leaving behind for the city of Victoria is a very large interactive spreadsheet to monitor the pavement management program. It's kind of a snapshot of it. We've developed this over the years because frankly, about 2/3 of our clients are repeat clients. And when we would come back into a city to resurvey in 5 years, they would have a software system of record that nobody was operating. And we would leave behind spreadsheets because we would need to put data into spreadsheets to load into their software, and they would be maintaining those spreadsheets. Everybody knows how to operate a spreadsheet. So we beefed up that spreadsheet over the years into a comprehensive system. Everything you're seeing in yellow on that spreadsheet is a hot cell, interactive cell. So for instance, I don't have the ability to point, but if you look right above the blue IMS sign, this comes up quite frequently. Funding is always an issue for pavement management. There are times when a city will know that it's not funding its pavements correctly, but they do not want to financially obligate themselves to increase the annual budget. So a public works director will get a call that sounds something like, we really don't want to increase your budget annually, but what would happen if we dropped X number of dollars into the budget one time next year? Well, he would add that amount to the year 2 budget line, click enter, and it would recalibrate the entire plan. The budget lines, he could actually tell you over the phone, in effect, pretty close to what the effect would have on your pavement ratings and condition. So there's a lot of power in that spreadsheet because it allows you to use the data in a way that makes sense to everybody involved and make financial decisions instead of maintenance decisions. Now, we rate 0 to 100. I've talked to the city a little bit about how they're rating pavements, and I won't spend much time on these slides, but this will just kind of scale it for you. This picture is a picture of a very poor street. This is a street that we would say needs to probably be torn out and replaced. Pretty bad road. You can see that water's getting in. It's really past the point of rehabilitation. Those are bad roads. These are your port of marginal roads. These are where we consider the very last chance for an overlay. And these are what my analysis will generally highlight, because what we're looking at with a city that's different kind of than what you're doing right now, we aren't necessarily looking for the worst streets to prioritize. If the city had unlimited funding and the entire network could be fixed, that's exactly the approach that we would take. I have only met one city in my entire travel that's fully funded. Everybody else is having to make hard decisions about what they will and will not fix. So the methodology that we apply to our analysis is cost optimization. If resources are limited, we want to apply them as brutally efficiently as we possibly can. So we're looking at the pavements that are going to drop in a condition that necessitates a more expensive rehab. And I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the world of pavement management, but the very last line of rehabilitation is called a 2-inch overlay or a heavy overlay. Generally in Texas, the rates per square yard for that type of rehabilitation run plus or minus about $15 a square yard. If that street is not maintained, in 2 to 3 years it drops into the next level down, which is reconstruction. The rate on that reconstruction is upwards of $40 a square yard. So if that pavement isn't given attention, what it's going to cost you to maintain is going to triple in a very short period of time. And those are the inflection points that we're trying to identify and get resources to as quickly as we can. This is kind of one of those streets, an illustration of it. I'll just you kind of get the picture here. These are good. I'll show you an excellent street. These are the streets that we call budget beaters, because these roads really don't take a whole lot of maintenance dollars for 5, 6, 7 years. Really allows you to take your budget a lot farther. Now, as we get this condition data assembled, we start trying to make sense of it. And this is a slide that we'll show over and over again. This is for the city of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And this is a chart that we've put in descriptive terms of what their network looks like, big picture. So we start to look at this graph, and we can see there are a couple of metrics that we look at. Obviously, their overall network score, which generally averages nationwide between a 60 and a 65 out of 100. Broken Arrow is pretty strong there. They're coming in at about a 70. But we want to look at how many bad streets they have too, because these are the streets that will really eat up your pavement management budget. These are your expensive fixes. We know from experience we have to keep that at or below 10% to be manageable. If it gets much over that, it'll take over your budget. And then we start looking at how many good streets, how many cost-free streets do we have going forward. And then lastly, we'll look at the shape of this overall curve. They're very healthy, but there are times when we see cities that have very good metrics, but you can see that the third and fourth bar will be expanded. What that tells us is that they have a really, really good public works department that's really underfunded. So they're keeping it together, doing some creative stuff to keep the network strong. But if they don't start doing 2-inch overlays at a very rapid rate, they're going to drift into a severe financial problem. This is just kind of a look. The hardest part of what we do is merging Victoria information into condition information. So the science of it is called performance curves, and we'll assign a different performance curve to every different type of a pavement you have, because they'll all depreciate at a different rate. And then we program that intelligence into the actual spreadsheet. So your pavements in that spreadsheet are programmed to age over time. And we call these priority factor weightings. We also have been doing this long enough to know that if we start out from a standpoint of cost efficiency, it will never hunt. All cities have different priorities and different things that they're trying to accomplish for a variety of reasons. We can accommodate all of that. We work with Norman, Oklahoma. Norman, Oklahoma has 8 separate budget pools that are tied to different rehabilitations. And they have 8 different wards, and the money has to be dispersed equally among all 8 wards. It's a nightmare. but we can accommodate that level of customization to accommodate what the city is prioritizing. And we also will start programming in specific information. We get very detailed about this, and I don't want to bore you, but we collect specific cost info for what the city of Victoria spends on rehabilitation. It'll be different from any other municipality in Texas and certainly any other state. So we need customized information. We can suggest rehabilitation strategies and get competitive vendors, but we start trying to program in everything that Victoria needs to be specific in the analysis. The end result starts out like this. And this is a graph. Can't remember who this is from, but you'll see the pavement condition index on the x-axis, and then the strength data on the y-axis. All those little dots are inflection points, and you can see the corresponding rehab treatments, but we start to prioritize what's the most cost-effective way to attack this network, given the funds that are available. And you can see the blue area hones in pretty much in almost every instance on those last chance heavy overlays before you drift into very expensive. But you can see it then shifts kind of over to the right to your surface treatments for your good roads, to keep your good roads from deteriorating. This will be different for every municipality that we work with. There are some general rules to that. Most people will want to prioritize their most heavily trafficked roads, so we will kind of lean scoring to what you tell us to lean it to. And this is where it really starts trying to intersect with the council. I've done a lot of council presentations. There's usually a disconnect into what the actual public works responsibility is, frankly. I talk to public works and streets people all the time, and I say, what's your job? What are you supposed to do? I say, I'm supposed to take care of the streets. Well, it's kind of true and kind of not. A good public works or streets guy that's been around for 5 or 10 years could fix every street in your network perfectly if funding was unlimited. So what their job really is to spend the budget that you give them as efficiently as they possibly can. It's the city's job to maintain the roads to the level of service and quality that they desire. And this is where the rubber starts to hit the road. You can see the budget on the x-axis and the PCI score on the y-axis. And we start trying to project out, okay, at what different levels of funding, what effect will it have on your network? And the conversations that we're trying to develop between the city and Public Works, it goes something like this. What are your plans this year? Well, I don't know. What condition level is acceptable to the city this year, given the funding? Well, what would happen if we spent this much? We can kind of plot it and vet it on this line. And it just makes some more financially accurate decisions to get everybody on the same page. It's not rocket science. You can see as the budget goes up, so does the condition. No magic. That's another representation of the same thing. The blue line that you see above is what would happen if Broken Arrow went in and wrote a check to fix their entire network to a very high 90s score. The black line that you see at the bottom is what would happen to their condition if they didn't spend another dollar over 5 years. And we can run as many of these scenarios as you would like to see. Same thing for backlog, and again, backlog is what we're calling total reconstruction. There are times when a budget level will achieve your condition targets, but you have a problem that's festering, and that's your backlog. Your backlog is depreciating. So we have to factor that into the budget conversation as well. Confidence in the results is very critical. Every new project that I've ever done, at some point, somebody will ask me, or ask the Public Works Director, how do we know these guys have any idea what they're doing? Well, we're very comfortable with it. We've done 1,000 projects, but we will also give you basic math comparisons. We can run the average life expectancy of your concrete and asphalt roadways, divide it by the life cycle, and come up with some very back-of-the-napkin estimates as to what your budget figures should be. So we give you some anchors to what we're showing you also. And as the next year progresses, and the next city council meeting occurs, and you're plotting along those budget lines, it becomes relevant very quickly. Now, this is something that I would be remiss if I didn't prepare you for. If you choose to go this route, this will happen almost always in the first week. You'll see 2 streets running side by side. One is in much worse condition than the other, and the better road has a crew on it. And you'll get calls, and people will say, why are you fixing the worst road? Well, it's about the intersection between maintenance and budget. We're trying to keep roads in the condition range that they're in and prohibit them from dropping into more expensive rehabilitations. It's just an example of what will happen. And there's a saying, this is not fun to acknowledge, but it's very true. From a financial aspect, an ugly street stays an ugly street for a long time, especially in Texas, because you don't have the freeze-thaw cycles that they do in the northern states. You've already pretty well taken your financial hit on a bad road. There's not a lot of financial risk going downward. A good road turns into an ugly road relatively quickly, and that's your financial risk. And I always close with a slide of something really bad. This was actually an earthquake in California. Any questions that you have?
I have a question. You mentioned a lot about overlays for street maintenance, but never mentioned chip seal.
We consider chip seal to be a thinner treatment, more of a thinner rehabilitation. Given that, if you have a good provider It's really the most bang for the buck in the toolkit 9 times out of 10. It's very inexpensive and you get a lot of life out of it.
Okay.
How do you tie this in with water lines and sewers that need to be replaced?
It's tricky. The analysis is only as good as the intelligence that goes into it. If you have sections of a network that you know are over the top of bad water and sewer lines, we can weight an analysis to give that priority. The only thing I can tell you, the reason we like doing this in a spreadsheet, we can be precise as we want to be. A 5-year rehabilitation plan will never hunt. It just won't. Things change at the speed of light. All of your rehab costs are going to change. Your budget is likely to change. And the city will want to put roads into that budget that aren't in the analysis at all. We expect all of that. The spreadsheet can be altered to a hot cell. You can input that information and it recalculates the whole plan while you're watching it. So there will be streets that get torn up for water and sewer that will have to be rehabbed. You just override the existing plan with that fix.
Can you or Donald clearly define for council what's included in the agreement?
Sure.
Because we had originally in the budget allocated, was it $60,000? And you notice that the contract's for a higher amount, so we're taking the difference from our just normal operational budget. But I think it's important that council understands the things that we added to the basic analysis that we felt was prudent and important to incorporate.
Sure. We start, when I send initial pricing, I always send what a basic RST survey is. Pickup data, deliver analysis. I will list other things that we do at the bottom of that. Now, you'll have to excuse me, I've been 1,400 miles in Texas this week, so I'm working with a lot of these. I might have to refer to Donald without looking at the actual document.
So besides the standard deliver items that he talked about, we're also decided that we wanted to look at the deflection testing, which wasn't in the initial proposal, and that's the item that looks below the street surface and looks into the base. We also decided that we wanted to tie the information into our GIS system, so that was an additional cost. And then finally, we asked him to come back to council one more time at the end of this and give a final report directly to y'all. So those are the additional items that we asked for.
And on that subsurface
Deflection
testing,
testing, yes.
it's only for, I think, collectors and arterials, correct?
That's correct as it stands right now. However, talking with Jeff earlier today, you know, the initial proposal was for 278, not lane miles, it's, what do you call it? Test miles. So some of our roads are concrete and some of our roads have also been redone recently. So there's a lot of mileage that I think we can shift from arterials and maybe put over to some of that additional deflection testing that we can maybe do for some residential as well.
With the deflection testing, obviously, those types of data help us determine projects. Will we still take soil-based samples?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That'll be done every time as long as I'm director.
Thank you.
This is a 5-year. Every 5 years. If we adopted this, it would be every 5 years we would do this?
We would have to come back to council every time. And get
But it is recommended that it
Yes.
happens every 5 years.
Absolutely.
How much do we pay right now for when we do a?
This one, the total is just under $88,000.
Well, but I mean, right now, we do it ourselves.
Oh.
But you turn it over to somebody for the data, they put the data together?
No, we do that all in-house.
You do that all in-house?
Yes, sir. It's completely done in-house.
No, I really think this is a great thing. We're in the 21st century.
I am interested to see if we go through this, will the results refute or support the studies that we've previously got?
I'm glad you said that. I'm interested to find that out as well. So my staff is doing the same process in conjunction this year, just to see how the results turn out. One more, at least one more time.
Well, it looks like the database that you're going to create can become a living tool moving forward
Yes.
for many, many years.
With the caveat that we can't bind future councils.
It's really one of the
We cannot
things.
bind future councils with the
And
decisions.
that means
Maybe
Donald's
they can still
know how to use the
appreciate what
Excel.
we did.
That's mission critical going forward, is to keep that spreadsheet updated. When you do rehab roads, put it in a hot cell, get a new PCI score. I should be able to call Donald 2.5 years from now, say, Donald, what's your current network-wide PCI score? And he would say, oh, hang on just a second. 72. What is it for just arterials? What is it for the concrete network? And it should be up to date and linked to your GIS.
And I think the link to the GIS, I think, is important because I think that creates an opportunity for us to be transparent with this information as well. There are many communities that you can visit their website and you could literally type in your address or pull up a map and be able to see for yourself which streets rated poor, which rated, good. And so it's really a good tool that some cities have chosen to just be transparent with, this is where we are, and if it's a good story to tell, great, and if it's not, here's the plan, or let's have a conversation about how we can fix it.
Defensibility. It puts a formal plan in place and gives a reason for the decisions that you're making, that you can back with hard data.
Mr. Garza, if we vote to approve this, you're committing that the city will keep it up to date.
As long as I am city manager, we will keep it up to date.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for bringing this idea to us.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your time.
I think we had a vote in a second.
Motion and a second, yes.
Right. We did have a motion and a second on this matter. If there's no other discussion or questions, does council have any other? Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
And, all right, before we move, I need
And how would we call for a 5-minute break?
a 2-minute break, me too.
Yeah.
2 minutes, 3 minutes,
5
5
minute
minutes?
might be
Simple.
appropriate.
5, let's do it 5.
So council will take a quick recess now at 7:03 for a 5-minute break.
I won, 5 minutes break.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I think that sounds good.
Okay, I think we have everyone here. I think we'll reconvene the meeting at
7:09.
7:09.
We've got city manager's report, and we'll run through these as efficiently as possible. The first one is April to talk about appointments with VSTDC.
Okay, the Victoria Sales Tax Commission is composed of 7 members with 2-year staggered terms. 4 members cannot be employees, officers, or members of the governing body of the city of Victoria, and the other 3 members are members of the governing body of the city of Victoria, one of whom is the mayor. They serve 4-year terms that begin on, or 4 of them serve 2-year terms that begin on January 1st of even number years and expire on December 31st of the next odd number year, and the opposite is true of the other 3 members. The mayor does serve the duration of his or her term as the mayor, and the directors may not serve more than 3 consecutive 2-year terms. Former directors are not eligible to serve again until after abstaining a minimum of 1 year from the date of their term expiration. A director originally appointed to fill a vacancy for a partial term may serve 3 full additional terms, and if the vacant position had less than 12 months remaining at the time of the former director's resignation. Our current board members include Lewis Knight, Lee Keeling, Decatur Joseph, Will Armstrong, Councilman Bachnight, Councilwoman Josephine Solis, and Mayor McCoy. The 3 with asterisks, so Mr. Knight, Ms. Solis, and Will Armstrong, and the 2, I'm sorry, are not eligible for reappointment due to the term limits. They've both served at least 3 full terms. So those terms for those 3 directors that will expire are ending on December of 2019 on the 31st. 1 council member must be appointed, and the other 2 positions must not be an employee, officer, or council member of the city of Victoria. We have currently received 2 applications for appointment, and then Mr. Armstrong, as he stated earlier, is interested in and eligible to be reappointed for another term. A resolution will be brought forth to the council on December 3rd, where you'll make those appointments. The applications are available in this, at my office or on the city's website with instructions on how to turn those in. And applications for appointment are accepted throughout the year and submitted to you guys when positions are available for different boards. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any way we can push the resolution to a further meeting from the December 3rd meeting? Could we do it as late as the first meeting in January?
Technically, we could. I mean, there would just be a holdover.
There wouldn't be any meeting of Sales Tax Development Corporation Board before then.
The sales tax meeting in January will be at the end of the month, so we could postpone it as late as the first meeting in January, I think, without too much difficulty.
I just want to make sure we get all the applications out there. I don't know that, I haven't done a good job of talking to people to make sure that everybody that's interested knows that it's available. I think it's a very important board, and I think it's become more important.
Well, I've had people ask for a description of the job, and other than in the bylaws, I'm not sure that we have one. So maybe if we did have an extension of the time period, it would give us a chance to allow people to know what is the expectation of the job and encourage more applications.
We can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think it's for those people that really want to be involved in truly setting economic development for the city.
Fair point.
Since you've educated us about the importance of that board.
Yeah.
And its origins and things. I think
You're welcome.
I'm
Yeah.
serious.
No,
Thank
yeah.
you.
And he continues to do that throughout the city, and I do appreciate that. So.
Yeah, and I do think there's an opportunity for, and we've talked about it internally, there's an opportunity for us to enhance and bring more prominence to just the boards and commissions that we have and the entire process, right? Ranging from how people apply to the process of voting for them to, even recognizing them for their service. I mean, we're having conversations about getting plaques for people that have served on our boards and commissions, to have ceremonies here with them so that you can thank them for their service. These are things that haven't happened, in the past. And so we're definitely trying to move in that direction, and we'll certainly take that approach with this board for now.
Well, thank you for letting us push that back to January. Mayor, thank you.
Nice point.
Thank you.
So next up, we have a VEDC activity report update from Mr. Dale Fowler.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council, Mr. Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you for your continued interest in economic development. Thank you for your intentional actions to help strengthen the Sales Tax Development Board, because after all, they are our most significant economic development partner in Victoria. I do have just a brief activity report. Every quarter, we present a activity report to the Sales Tax Development Corporation, and the year end, their fourth quarter, is a little bit more detailed and includes some information from surveys that we send out to the projects that we are currently working with, companies that are currently receiving some of the benefits from VEDC. Just to give you an overview, in the past quarter, or the last quarter, there were 67 marketing contacts, 6 formal proposals presented to companies, and some 14 project negotiations. I'll be more specific about that. Because of some of the regional groups that we're involved in, I'm going to go through this list a little bit more specifically. There were 18 site selectors contacted and visited with at the Site Selectors Guild that was held in Plano, Texas. Site Selectors Guild is a group of the most professional and acclaimed site consultants from across our country and even some internationally. And they come together once or twice a year. And of course, us economic developers want to be there because these are some of the people who are working some of the more high-profile projects throughout the country. Many of these site consultants have been to Victoria at one time or another over the past several years. We also did what was called a road show in conjunction with Team Texas. Team Texas is a group of Texas communities under the auspice of the Texas Economic Development Council, and we're a member of Team Texas, and together, a group of communities can summons a much better audience with both site selectors as well as company officials. And so we attended this roadshow to go to New York and New Jersey and Connecticut area and visited, well, I think 7 companies that we had prearranged meetings with, that these companies told us they had an interest in coming to Texas. And of course, when we're there, we're talking specifically about Victoria and how we can get them interested in Victoria. Also with Team Texas, hosted a Consultant Connect, another group of consultants in Lubbock this year, and we were able to get out there and get in front of another 6 or 7 consultants to tell them about Victoria. And then finally, we're part of Industrial Asset Managers Association. This group is kind of an exclusive group. They limit the number of economic developers compared to company representatives that can even be a member of this group. And we've been a member for about 6 or 7 years now, and it's an opportunity to get with and mingle with company officials, both some companies that we currently have here in Victoria, as well as new companies. At that meeting, I was able to get in front of 6, really many more, but 6 that I had some meaningful conversation with companies, including the real estate leaders of one of our existing manufacturing facilities, to keep that relationship going. And I'll talk a little bit more about existing industry program in just a moment. All of those types of visits culminated in some 14 projects that we're currently working, and that means I think we had about 30 individual visits or people visits to our community over those 14 companies. I mentioned that we put out a survey once a year to the projects that are currently receiving some benefit or assistance from VEDC. This year there were 6 companies. We put out a survey. We got a 50% response. The survey basically says, would you please describe the value provided by the services offered by VEDC? And it's open-ended, and we let them talk. I'd like to read you just briefly, and I'll paraphrase what some of these companies said. One said, we have sincerely appreciated our partnership with VEDC over the past several years. From our initial 2010 discussions involving the new Greenfield facility to our most recent collaboration related to localizing our global supply base. The VEDC team has been instrumental in helping our leadership showcase the Victoria area, and he goes on to talk about how they were trying to showcase future projects within their corporation and the help that we gave them. Another company said, we would not be located in Victoria if it not for the assistance provided. We maintain a staff of 16 to 18 at this location. Our market conditions have placed extreme pressure on their customers over the past several years. This has transferred to less than desirable results in our industry. Toss in a hurricane to add a bit more stress. We can use all the assistance that we can muster and appreciate the past and future support of the VEDC. And finally, one company says that we continue to have excellent support from VEDC. We have partnered with the Economic Development Corporation for a number of years and projects. The VEDC is not only an effective vehicle for attracting new business, but also helps us renew our investment in the community, and goes on to talk about some of the projects that we're working with them. I would point out that probably the most notable from an existing industry perspective, this year at least, was our working with Invista. The local Invista plant had an opportunity to sell to their corporation an over $2 million reinvestment in some modernization of their facility. And we worked with Invista and the county to help negotiate some incentives that help push that project over. And they are now underway with that project, creating some new construction jobs and then helping to maintain or solidify the jobs that they already had in that unit of their plant. We tend to measure some of our progress or our value by the ad valorem and sales tax generated by the projects that we influence specifically. So we go out there and we look at the County Appraisal District, Central Appraisal District's website. It's pretty easy to verify these numbers, but just those 6 projects in 2019 provided over $319,000 of new ad valorem tax to the city of Victoria, over $940,000 to Victoria County from those 6 projects. But then further, we went back and we kind of do a running total of projects all the way back from 2003, especially those as they run off of tax abatements and things like that. Even though they have some depreciation, the tax value tends to increase. Since that time, the projects that VEDC has influenced has brought more than $4.9 million to the city and over $6.4 million to the county coffers, and that's just ad valorem. These numbers don't specifically address sales tax that is generated through all of the spinoff industries, or even ad valorem tax from spinoff industries from the jobs that are being created. You may remember back in 2017, and so this is sort of a reminder, we paid Impact Data Source out of Austin, Texas, to look at all those projects that we had influenced and assign a value number, both in ad valorem as well as ad valorem and sales tax generated because of those projects. And those numbers come in much more generous, but I still think conservative. And they would suggest that over those 14 years, that VEDC projects have generated over $55.9 million for all taxing entities across the board, but actually $10 million to the city of Victoria, sales tax and ad valorem tax combined. And then again, yes, that's both combined. So just wanted to let you know that there's value being generated, not just with existing industry, but also assisting marketing to new industry, but assisting existing industry. We do a poor job sometimes of talking about what we're doing with existing industry, the visits that we make with them and the assistance that we offer. That's on us. It tends to be more exciting to talk about the recruiting the new industries, but in reality, and it's already been mentioned here before, the existing industry are a much easier sell. They already have an investment here, and so but we do want to keep them and, if possible, help them grow. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
I want to briefly add, just as an FYI to council, that at the Sales Tax Development Corporation meeting yesterday, the agreement between the Sales Tax Development Corporation and VDC was finalized, and there was a few components that were incorporated into the agreement that I think, as an FYI, I think the rest of council should be familiar with or aware of. One of those, as Dale just talked about, how there could be a better job of focusing on existing businesses. There was some language incorporated into the agreement to emphasize a retention program, and so there was some language added to that. There was also, in an effort to improve the relationship between VEDC and Sales Tax Development Corporation, there was an additional clause that was added to ensure that, besides the mayor, who already serves on both, that there be a non-elected official member from the Sales Tax Development Corporation, ideally the president of Sales Tax Development Corporation, be a non-voting member of the VDC board. And this is intentional so to ensure that there's effective communication going on between both groups, because Dale can't be successful without the support of the Sales Tax Development Corporation, and the Sales Tax Development Corporation can't be successful if VDC's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so the intent is to improve those lines of communication. We also incorporated some language to ensure that Dale provides verbal report to the Sales Tax Development Corporation on some of the reasons why we fall short on some of these pursuits. We already know some of them. So for example, the fact that we have minimal options as it relates to industrial park sites, right? Another priority identified in Victoria 2035, by the way. But these are things that we're kind of working towards. There's also been some informal conversations, informal adjustments made through conversations between Dale and I about enhancing their existing reporting mechanism. There's been a lot of conversation about, well, they only focus on big businesses, not small ones. There's sometimes confusion about, well, where would those businesses be located? How much land do they need? And so the reporting tool that's being provided to the Sales Tax Development Corporation will now include information that will help us discern how much acreage is needed for each project, where is it located, how many jobs is it going to create, information that will be more useful for all of us to have more in-depth conversations about where we are, where we need to be, and how to get there. And so the latest agreement, I think, takes a step in that direction. And thank you, Dale, for your leadership in helping us get there as well.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to have Chief Fox real quick, literally real quick. He's been waiting for 2.5 hours for.
That's right.
For his 30 seconds of fame.
15. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Garza. Just wanted to give everyone a real quick update on our Fire Station 1 storm hardening and renovation project. As we presented back in the budget preparation process, we plan to do a pretty extensive overhaul and storm hardening and renovation project for Station 1, which is at 606 East Goodwin. And as we talked and made that presentation, that project was going to be primarily funded with our ambulance supplemental payment program. Well, unbeknownst to me and Mr. Reyna, there was a significant change in that funding process thanks to a lawsuit that we could not forecast. So we're going to have to change that project up a little bit. So we're going to bring that into phases. Over the next couple fiscal years, we're still moving forward with phase 1, which will be the roof replacement and hardening. And then in phase 2, we plan on building a warehouse on this back 2 lots back here in the property. And then finally, phase 3 is the interior renovation of that station. You kind of say, well, that's good. How does that involve council? Well, as we began this project, we learned a couple interesting things. One, the Sales Tax Development Corporation owns those 2 lots back there that we fenced in back in 2005. But what we found out in research is in 2001, they purchased those lots to help with the underpass project for the sole purpose of that fire station expanding and future projects for the fire station. So Mr. Gush is working with them to transfer that land to the city of Victoria. The other unique thing we found out was that the 600 block of Commerce Street was never abandoned abandoned, I guess, for a right-of-way, and we fenced it in. So we're just doing our part to help Donald take care of the streets. We've been taking care of it since 2005. But that's where we need council's help. Our goal is to officially abandon that street, and Thomas has made us aware that it's a 4-league grant road. Therefore, when we abandon it, we can own both sides of that property, and we don't have to split it down the middle. We've also talked to the railroad who owns that property just north of it, and their local foreman said they're okay with that. They use that access there, as you can see, right off Depot Street. And lastly, our last goal, and we'll be coming back to council with this, is to turn that whole plot into one big into one big project. That way that's neatly tied up and made into one plat for the city of Victoria with one owner. And we'll be coming back to council with those 2 items in the near future. Be happy to answer any questions. All right, thank you.
And we are not using Sales Tax Development Corporation money for.
And we are not using Sales Tax
Story.
Development Corporation money. We're not asking for money.
When you plat it.
Inside joke, right? Yeah.
When you plat it, if you don't have any variances, you won't have to bring the plat to us.
Well, good deal.
The last city manager report, Mayor and members of council, is mine, and I promise it's the last report I will give tonight. This is an update on the franchise agreement with Victoria Electric Cooperative for broadband services. I only have this on the agenda because at the last meeting, I told you I would be bringing you tonight a franchise agreement for broadband services with Victoria Electric Cooperative. After that meeting, there was some proposed changes to that franchise agreement related to the way that we would calculate the funding of their franchise fee. And so that agreement is not ready to bring back to you tonight. Negotiations are continuing on at a favorable pace. I do anticipate that we will have something to bring back to you very shortly, and I think we will wind up very close to where we started. So hopefully we will see that on an agenda in the near future. But since I said on TV last meeting that I would have it tonight, I thought I should say on TV tonight that I don't.
Can I ask for a point of clarification real quick, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As that is Mr. Gush's last announced
for
presentation for the
tonight.
evening, does that mean that we have no executive session and we will be adjourned for the evening?
No, that means someone else is doing executive
Well, I
session.
just say your name's on there.
Yeah, my name's on there, but nice try. Yeah, there you go.
I do want to, I know I'm technically not on council, so can't request the point of personal privilege, if you will. But I do want to acknowledge publicly that this is John Kaminsky's last regular city council meeting. What? We have another one?
Announce it anyway.
Oh, okay, never mind.
I'll step out if you want me
Disregard.
to.
Disregard.
When this
I don't know why,
meeting is
I don't know why
over,
I
but,
thought, I don't know why I thought,
Pretty sure I have one more meeting.
okay, then never mind.
Give away the surprise.
Thank you. Somebody please tell them outside to come back next month.
Well, we forgot.
There being no further business, the city council will recess for executive session on the 19th day of November 2019 at 7:31 PM. The subject matter of the executive session deliberation is as follows: Texas Government Code Section 551.087 to discuss or deliberate the offer of financial or other incentive to a business prospect that the city council seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the city of Victoria and with which the city of Victoria is conducting economic development negotiations. And secondly, Texas Government Code Section 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property interest due to the fact that a deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the city in negotiations with a third party. Thank you.
And I believe that there will be no action required from these meetings, so we will not reconvene in open session, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.